Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Say Report. I'm your host, Devin Decker, and joining me, my host companion, Sejan Sarowick. Sejan?
Hey, Dev. I have a very important question about what kind of man you are.
Okay.
I need to know, and I think this is good. We need to record this so that we have it in prosperity. Are you an always floor chicken kind of man or an always money bag kind of man?
Oh, always money bag. Always money
Yeah.
bag. Yeah.
What is the point of always floor chicken? I was
Um,
really ready for you to go the other way, by the way. I was ready for this to be like a debate about us two, but no, we're both on pretty much on the same
I
page.
mean, the problem is, here's. All right, so clearly we're talking about vampire survivors, and I came into this somber because if you clicked on the name of this episode, you see it's the Conroy Gallagher report, and that is because over the past week since we last recorded, we have lost Kevin Conroy and comedian Anthony Leo Gallagher Jr. And that affected us. But Sejan, in his ever expanding wisdom, has started off the episode with a perfect way to distract me from my grief and my sadness. Of which I will just say, I feel like we're responsible for Gallagher's death, Sejan, and I don't love that. Because
Yeah.
we
I mean, look. Here's the thing: is you could joke about how we talked about Gallagher, and then suddenly now Gallagher has passed on. But you have to think about this. I'm just always thinking about Gallagher, so that was just inevitable. That
okay,
dude,
see,
the way the what Gallagher did for prop comedy, like he will always be an example of no, prop comedy can be legit, right?
yes,
Like
yes.
like like and every art style needs that. Every art style needs that one person that you can be like nobody else can pull it off, but that guy can do it. Like think about it. Think about it in terms of like the guy that doesn't really have to act. You know, nobody can ever say you can't make a career out of that because George Clooney's a fucking billionaire at this point.
Boom. Let's pull down Clune Dog. I'm sorry.
Nah, no, Clooney definitely has plenty of movies in which he acts. He just doesn't always have to, which I think is an important choice.
Well, I mean, when your first movie role is Return of the Killer Tomatoes, and that's what gets you noticed by like Universal and a bunch of roles. And let's
Yeah,
be honest, as much as
and
you
the
and I,
handyman on
yeah, Facts of Life,
for
you,
Facts of Life, right? Yeah,
yeah,
that was the other big one.
yeah, that was big. And then he was also in Roseanne. Like, that's the other thing. I love that he was in Roseanne. And I love that he said, I would love to come back for the Connors if they asked me. But then, like, I imagine all the writers, like, well, who's going to call him then? Like, oh my God, is it true or is it just a classic George Clooney prank?
Yeah, that classic prank where he just says something charming and nobody wants to take him seriously.
Apparently
It's
he's a
his
big fan
curse.
of pranks. Let's be like, but I love George Clooney, and
I
it
mean, when
is
you're a god amongst men, you get a little bored. So
Ain't it the truth, sister? Anywho, yeah, so their passing away hit, but it really hit when I'm like, it'd be like if Gallagher hit a watermelon and the hammer exploded, and then the next day I read that he has passed away, and I'm like, did that happen? Did I manifest this? Oh my God, poor Gallagher.
I think if anybody out there really is not too aware of who I feel like everybody's kind of aware who Gallagher is, or if not, he's the guy that would hit watermelons with a hammer. And if that means nothing to you, you've moved on from that cultural moment, and that's okay. But if that does mean something to you, it suddenly has clicked for you. Yeah, that's where we're at on that one. Um, uh, but as far as Kevin Conroy goes, I don't know if everybody is fully aware. Like when we say that Kevin Conroy was Batman, Kevin Conroy was Batman.
Was Batman.
Like is Batman. I mean, like his work as Batman is not going anywhere. Like Kevin Conroy will always be just a phenomenal Batman. Not only did he do the Arkham games in the original series, but he did a bunch of the movies. He did a bunch. I mean, like I guess one of the last things he did was he did DC's universe, the crossover game there. What's the name? Multiverse. Um,
Multiverses. That game
Multiverses.
that
Yeah.
neither one of us is playing, despite it being free to play because it is a free to play mess. No offense to Kevin Conroy or anyone else who worked on the game. It is just
Well, and let's be clear,
yeah,
free-to-play games are always a mess for the first year or two and while they figure out their footing. But the thing about free-to-play games is that they always seem to have their second life. If they're if they've got enough money to survive the bashing that they get in their first year, then they go on to do some pretty interesting things later on. I will always point to like the rebirth of Star Trek Online as like a perfect example of that, which wasn't free to play at first, but had to become free to play in order to do its whole like revamp. And then when it did, is now considered one of the best like MMO RPGs out there. And that's just one example of many. But yeah, Kevin Conroy has done a ton of work with that. But I would encourage anybody out there to see if they can find there's a video that Mark Hamill did an interview, I think back when Child's Play was coming out, with one of those YouTube formats where they're like, let's break down your career, your most iconic characters type videos, right? And in it, he obviously talks about playing the Joker and talks very specifically about Kevin Conroy as Batman and about how that relationship was hugely important to him. And that moving forward, basically, I think his exact words were, if Kevin was in it, I said yes. Like, if they called me up and they said, "Are you interested in playing the Joker?" And he's like, "Is Kevin in this one?" And he's like, "Yeah." Then he's like, "Then I don't even need the script. I'm in. Just sign me up." And there's no bigger praise, right, than knowing that that's the kind of work that you were putting out there, that somebody was willing to do that. Not just somebody, freaking Luke Skywalker
Yeah.
was like, I didn't even have to look. If I knew he was involved in the project, I was involved.
Yeah, because Kevin Conroy, he did the work. He wanted to make sure that if he's going to voice the character of Batman, it was up to his standard. And
I mean, even playing it so far, IRL, right? Like, didn't he in the Arrows series end up coming and playing Bruce Wayne? Like,
all I know is I was about to reference that the Batwoman episode that was the big crossover between all of the universes. In one of the parallel worlds that Ruby Rose Batwoman at the time, because it was season 1, visits, the Bruce Wayne of that world is Kevin Conroy in an exosuit, and it was excellent. It was so cool to see him play that role in real life and actually get to do a live action portrayal of Batman. And that is something that will always stick with me, especially because that later that same year, I wound up in that room, that panel at Providence Comic-Con, where it was Kevin Conroy, Tara Strong, and John DiMaggio. And that was like a sold out panel. And I was walking by and they're like, "We have an empty seat." And I'm like, "Yeah, I guess I'll watch that. That seems fun." And now, like, it's one of my most cherished memories because I actually got to sit and like bask in the glow and warmth of this voice actor, this actor that nobody has had a bad thing to say about in the time since he passed. Everybody is sharing these stories about how he lifted everybody else in the room with just the way that he approached the job and what it was, especially as we're learning like so much about voice acting. And while the Bayonetta 3 thing may have gone the way that the Bayonetta 3 thing ended up going, with it being gross over under exaggerations about how much he was offered, and the fact that that probably set back voice actor rights and like proper payment for decades, which is just awful. Like, I'm so upset about that. It is nice.
I would say that what it did was it definitely put a huge scar in audience understanding of that stuff. I am confident that there are still people behind the scenes that are going to make stuff like that, are going to keep pushing for that kind of stuff despite that nonsense. I can't even begin to express like how aggravated and angry some of that like stuff was making me. I mean, I had to stop like getting involved in reading some of it, because like it's not affecting my life personally, but I do still have like a fair opinion on some of that stuff because we know people in that world, right? Like we went to school with tons of people that ended up doing voice work, and the idea being that like that it is kind of this right now, this like kind of hierarchy and mob mentality of like, there is this, when I say mob mentality, I mean like the mob, the mafia, not like a huge amount of people like pushing stuff, but there's like this whole like weird mafia structure to like how it gets doled out and things like that. But the thing about like somebody like Kevin Conroy is you never felt like he was taking advantage of that.
Right.
Right. Like when he showed up, like it was always a treat. It never felt like it was like, man, this guy again. We hear him everywhere, and he never does anything different. It's just this character everywhere he goes. Like, and there are some people out there that we could probably name right now where people feel that way. Whether they're right or they're wrong, it definitely feels like certain voice actors are just always there, and it doesn't seem like they're doing much other than just showing up and being them.
Yeah, it's a weird thing, but it's nice to hear everything good that's been said about Kevin Conroy. It's been really good to see just how much he actually touched and affected people, and I certainly hope that he knew that before he passed. But again, by all accounts, everybody was always like very vocal about how much he meant to them as Batman. And
Yeah.
you talk about Mark Hamill. If Conroy's involved, I'm going to jump on. I mean, that's why we got Mark Hamill in the Arkham games and in the Killing Joke after he very publicly said, I don't think I'm going to be portraying the Joker anymore.
Yeah, yeah, right. Yeah, I mean, the guy was, I mean, and and I think he had some understanding of how important he really was as a voice for Batman and as a voice for people in general, because one of the beauties of cons, as gross as they can get and as much as people have really been taken advantage of more and more over the years, the whole convention life is just not, the glorified you're not raised up on a golden throne everywhere you go, like some people seem to think you are, just because you're an actor showing up at a con. But he still went all the time, like for all the way up to the end. He was going to cons and meeting fans and seeing people, and he was constantly being, surrounded by people that were always telling him what he meant. So I hope that he really truly understood how genuine a lot of that was. I mean, I have to imagine he did from what we know about what kind of guy he was.
I mean, yeah. What really spoke to it about me is the fact that while I say that panel I went to was sold out, it was really more the fact that there were tickets that could be claimed, and all of the tickets had been claimed. It wasn't an additional cost to see Kevin Conroy speak. And that always really meant something to me, because you go to these convention floors and everybody else is just charging really just to talk to them and to get that picture and to get that autograph. And
He
it's like,
paid 600 to get in the door, and now you need to spend another $200 if you want anything inside.
yeah, like it's just, I really like that every time I saw him at a con, and he was at a lot of conventions that I was going to back before the pandemic, and I don't know if I'll ever go to another one. That's just an honest statement, because they were petri dishes before the pandemic, and now who the fuck knows. But every time I saw that he was at a con, it was to see him speak and to engage with him in that way never cost extra money, and I always respected that. There was always just something that you could be a part of
Yeah.
if you got there in time, right? Because there is unfortunate, limitations of space.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, it was a sad one this week for sure.
But yeah, and it was especially sad because I boarded the plane for Wakanda, and then as soon as I got back into the U.S. of A., like those were the two things that had happened while I was gone. So
Yeah. You were already in a
I was
soft
already in
space.
a bit of a state,
Yeah.
But before we talk about Wakanda Forever and Black Panther, I would like to get back to that different kind of Batman that Sejan kicked off the episode with. And the age-old question, you let us know at the Say Report on Twitter, of always money bags or always floor chicken. And what you need to understand, Sejan, is Vampire Survivors, which is the game we're speaking of, there was a time where you didn't have the option to go always one or the other.
Oh,
Every time.
yeah, and there was a moment early on where it was starting to get a little annoying, because I think I told you that like one of my first runs, like within like 15 minutes, I basically had OP'd to the point where I just didn't have to move for like the next 15 minutes. And in that, like I hit a point where I was leveling up. I had gotten an upgrade to my collection range, right?
Mhm.
And it was like a huge one. So I was like collecting from just like miles away. So like I was also like shooting out 1,000 things at once. As you know, you get towards the end of a run of Vampire Survivors, and like the whole point is that you get overpowered to an insane amount. So I didn't have to move because there was never a moment where I wasn't sucking in everything that was being dropped. And so like I just sat there and just up and leveled up as I went, and didn't move for 15 minutes. And in that, having to select over and over and over and over again, and not needing the floor chicken,
Yeah.
I was like, this is getting a little grating. And that game is really good at knowing exactly like how much is too much, like the amount of tweaking that must be going on to this day with that game, because there's never a moment where something gets really kind of grating or grindy where then there isn't some other solution for it. So like it's very good in that regard. The only thing is that there's definitely builds of that game. There's too many builds of that game where you no longer have to play it after like 15 minutes, and it's just like there's a certain point where I'm watching that game more than I'm playing that game, and and I've been exploring other games in that kind of genre of the like horde mode roguelike of that is Vampire Survivors. Like I am I'm playing two or three other games in that regard, and they all have their faults and their issues. But the other two, Bounty of One and Brotato, just to point out what I'm playing, don't ever feel like I never stop moving those games, especially Brotato. Brotato, I think, is a full-on release at this point. I think it's considered out, unlike the other two both being early access still. Vampire Survivors is still early access, right?
No, Vampire Survivors released on October 15th.
Okay, so it just came out.
That was the day that
but it's
I'm
still
like,
being like updated every other
oh
day.
yeah,
Getting,
especially
yeah,
you can
yeah.
still be part of the public beta too, which is
Well,
all
right,
sorts
so
of fun stuff in there. So
so there's it also raises a lot of questions in that realm, but we're not there right now. We're talking about actual in-game stuff. So in those other games, I never stop moving. I never stop playing. Bounty of One, I do get to moments where I can stand still, but those are more of like a relief, and it's never for longer than like a minute or two while I can like take a second, take a sip of my coffee, get back to what I'm doing, and then like I have to move because there's fireballs coming at me. Um, and and Brotato, you just never stop. You can't stop in that game. So it's really weird to have these like long stretches of just like it kind of takes some of the intensity out of it for me. That being said, where Vampire Survivor shines compared to the other two is just the amount of stuff in it. There is just so much going on between the number of different characters, the number of different builds, the number of different upgrades, and how you can like dock those, you can remove those upgrades and manipulate them and stuff like that. Also, just all of the stuff with like the hyper modes and the revives that you can buy, so that suddenly you're also like you can be a little bit more dangerous. There's a lot more flexibility in Vampire Survivors than in the other two that I've been playing or any of the other ones that I've seen. So like it shines in that regard. It's just got this weird one hitch to it for me where if you get really good really fast in a run, and it doesn't happen every run, like I would say one out of every three or one out of every four, I just hit a moment where I suddenly am just I've gotten to the point where I have basically, tackled that level, and I'm not looking for anything else. There are other goals that you could be achieving, but I haven't been working to them at that point. So like I'm done with the run at that point, but the run still has 15 minutes left to it. And the only reason that I think it really becomes a sticking point for me is because they've done such a good job of being like, hey, you sick of clicking on floor chicken this many times? Why don't you just select the option for always floor chicken, and then you don't ever have to click it again? Like, yeah, good, thank you, give me that. Can I just click skip to end of run? Can I like turn it on and just like I don't know, fast forward mode or something, and then just like get through to the rest of this in like 5 minutes as opposed to 15? Like there's a little too much downtime too often for this kind of game for me to give it like a complete like 5 star.
all right, so I mean, I've been thinking about what my game of the year is going to be, especially as I think tomorrow the game of the year nominations and all the game award stuff is going to be dropping. So I'll
Oh, that's
actually
okay,
see
Jeff.
what
And it's
Jeff Keighley
Infernax, and you
said.
know it, so you don't
I
really have to think
know
about
it's probably going to be Infernax. Thank you, Siegen, for remembering that.
it.
You're a good friend to me.
I mean, don't stress. I got your answer.
Yeah, I know, but it's like, but something like Vampire Survivors, where in April I downloaded it the day we recorded our very special episode about Superbad, and then suddenly I lift up my head and it's November, and
Mhm.
I can't believe that the game has been a part of the year for these last, what is that, 4 to 11, so 7 months. I've just been playing Vampire Survivors, like,
Yeah.
and not as any sort of like, there were times where it was like my main game, but mostly I drop in for like a run or two and then I go do something else. Like it's at that point where it's kind of just a time passer in the moment, and then I'll find another game to actually dedicate to.
Yeah.
But then
I
also
think that
watching
I think
it
it kind of
grow,
doesn't do
like,
itself any favors in that regard.
yeah.
Is that like it becomes such a time waster of a game that it almost, I mean, a la like a mobile game you don't even start to register it as like having fun or a game anymore. It's now just like part of your routine. And I'm not saying this has happened with Vampire Survivors for me yet, but that is definitely a risk with some games, right? Like that's what happened with me with Mario Maker 2 is I've had to step away for a little bit because I suddenly realized I was working on this huge project with it for a couple of months and I'm so close to the end and I was like, oh, I should just push myself to just do it. And I realized, oh, this has just become work, right? Like this is not fun anymore. And like if you had asked me 2 months ago, like, hey, what are you having a lot of a blast doing? And I would have told you, actually, the game I'm really into right now is Mario Maker. You ask me that now, and I'm like, I can't touch the game right now. I need a couple of days to do that. But Vampire Survivors very much risks that, right? By being so addictive and so easy to pick up and play and put down and walk away, that like it also I need to remind myself that like no, it's a like the, it's a legitimate game. Like you can't think about it like Candy Crush. Like I, no offense to Candy Crush, but it's not going to win any Game of the Year awards, right? Like it's not going to be the thing that like everybody talks about being like the new innovation in gaming, right? Whereas like Vampire Survivors has a lot going on in that regard. So like just because you can get to a point where it becomes like numb, where you become numb to what's actually happening, doesn't mean that the game itself has problems. Quite the opposite.
Yeah. So I have to ask you before we go any further, as somebody who has claimed all 142 currently available achievements, how far are you in the game? Like, how many levels would you say you've gotten to 30 minutes on?
Just the woods of the library and the what's the one after the
The
library? The
dairy
the
plant.
factory,
Yeah.
right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I've only done those, but it's because I have I've been trying out all the character stuff. So
Right.
I've
Yep.
bought at least all of the characters that I currently have available. I think there's two characters I haven't unlocked yet. I'd have to look and see what the lists are because it's also not a game you can like spoil too much of. Also, I don't, I'm not a big spoiler guy to begin with, but I don't feel bad looking up information about this game. But in that regard, I also am then not being forced to retain much of it because I can always just pull like a wiki up or a subreddit or something and dive into some stuff that people are talking about. So I would probably venture to say that I've maybe touched maybe 15-20% of this game. I would not say that I've gotten like hugely deep into it.
Okay. So that's cool to me because the way that you're feeling and the fact that you already understand the like customization of it and how you can make the game your own. We got so you haven't unlocked Gallows Tower yet, which is the fourth stage.
No, I've not. Definitely not.
Okay, I cannot wait. Oh, I gotta stop. I know that you're not a spoiler guy. I don't want to spoil it. You may have already spoiled it for yourself, but I don't want to be the vessel for it. But a lot of the things that you're talking about, it's there's going to be a shift happening very soon for you, and I'm excited for when that shift occurs. I'm glad that I asked how much you've played of the game before like just opening my mouth and splurting out everything. Because yeah,
Yeah,
Gallows
because
Tower is where there's the big shift. I mean, there's also pretty much a big shift in the gameplay loop once you get to the dairy plant, because you've gotten
yeah,
the map, right?
I'm trying for the map. I have not
Okay,
gotten it yet.
yeah. Once you get the map, that opens up the game in a very cool way, and the
Yeah.
way that they parse out gameplay to you is very interesting. And I have to say, I'm glad that we're having this discussion about Vampire Survivors. It's kind of the perfect time for it. A, because now we've both played it, but B, on the 10th of November, so what, 4 days ago, they dropped the Xbox console version of Vampire Survivors on Game Pass.
Hmm.
So I'm like, as soon as it's available on the console that is hooked up to our TV, you're gonna play a game, Mom. Like I don't know if it's for you, but I want to see how you react to it. And she got so into it where she's just like, I got to do one more run. And I'm just like,
Nice.
that's the cool thing. And it wasn't like she was OP or blowing anything out of the water in that first run, but it was just the fact that like you could see the enjoyment in her face walking around and doing it because it really evokes kind of the old school arcade. You're going to die eventually. The question is, how long do you survive on this quarter mentality? I would like if they were smart, they would try to get into like Dave and Buster's. Like they should do a version for like arcades, because I think it would really work, especially the fact
I
that
mean, like, I think honestly, I think other roguelikes like Rogue Legacy and maybe Nuclear Throne. I'm trying to think. There's some other ones kind of that are really, really close to this one that have actual arcade releases. So it's not too far off of a possibility. I don't know if I can think of any like horde mode ones. Technically, I think Nuclear Throne is considered a horde mode roguelike, but there's a lot more like level exploration, I feel like, in that one.
yeah.
Have you ever seen that one? It's like Vampire Survivors, but then there is also like a map that like of a level that you can like go around and like collect certain power-ups. And so you can almost kind of guarantee like I know that if I land in this kind of room, I can get this kind of thing and that sort of stuff. People get really into Nuclear Throne on a level that I have not yet approached it.
The thing
But
for me, like, because I'd like to try Rotator, I'd like to play Bounty of One. I've looked at some other ones. It's all the cost of entry that is what throws me off of doing it. Vampire Survivors for me was $3, and I have easily gotten like $300 worth of entertainment out of it. And that's crazy. Like, that's an insane thing that I just said, but it's
and
so
this is not
true.
me putting you on the spot.
Yeah.
This is purely for science. At any point, could you see yourself giving more money to them?
No.
Okay.
I
mean, like that's kind of a and you're not the only one, right? Because I understand where you're going with this, right? Is this idea being that you were able to pay $3 and get in on this amazingly expansive experience? So the idea of spending $15 on Nuclear Throne doesn't appeal to you because you don't need that, right? At 5 times the cost. So like this idea being that like, well, no, then I don't have to pay that money. The problem is that at some point, Vampire Survivors is probably not going to be able to survive as a $5 game with the amount of work that they've been putting into it. We're either going to find out that like the people behind it have like burned themselves out into oblivion, or they're going to need to start charging more.
And they already did. When it went into full release, the price went up to $6, and I know that that's still a pittance compared to the $3 and compared to the $15, or I think one of them I saw was $20. That might have been like Mystical Bell or something like that. Like there are people who do videos on Vampire Survivors on YouTube, and then I watch the other games that are similar to it, which is why something like Bounty of One and Brotato are ones that appeal to me, because I've seen a little bit of the gameplay loop, and it's kind of got a lot of the similar sensibilities as Vampire Survivors. But right now, I'm not tired of Vampire Survivors. I just started a new game on a separate computer via my Steam account that I've like really held myself to the challenge of I want to beat the full game as Gennaro Balapanese.
Nice.
And I did it. I mean, I beat the first 5 levels as him, and I've completed...
He's Knife Guy, right?
He's Knife Guy.
As opposed to Whip Guy.
He's He-Man. And his only boon is that he adds +1 projectile to any projectile weapon he picks up, which is interesting. But it makes him essentially 50% stronger than anybody else because he can do that much more damage. I really dig the character, and I really dug the character until I unlocked a character later on who, you know, I guess maybe it's a theme this episode, is kind of Bayonetta in Vampire Survivors clothing.
Nice.
And that is the one that I dumped a lot of time and other resources that you don't have access to yet, but just know that there is a secondary resource pool that is going to become open to you as you continue playing the game. So now that character is just like, if I want to just destroy the game, I play as her. And it's like, but I liked Gennaro, and I'm sad that I kind of, you know, forsook him after I got to this point with Pugnala. That's her name. Spoilers. Her name's Pugnala. And I'm like, but now that I'm playing it on Steam again on a separate computer, and I've severed the Steam cloud, so I'm not going to mess up either game. Hopefully.
Nice.
Like, it was fun playing as Gennaro and being like, yeah, this is the character that I like, and getting through and kind of killing the first end game boss, right? Because there's an end game boss, and then there's like extra bosses and all sorts of beautiful stuff that is present in this game. Like, it felt good to do that, and I'm still playing that game to see if I can get all of the unlock stuff again. But again, just with Gennaro instead of this other character who's pretty overpowered. I mean, I will say this: the final secret, like hyper boss that I did end up defeating them as Genero, and that felt pretty good.
Yeah. No, yeah, there's all sorts of like really cool customizable approaches to it. As I said, I think that that's its big hook for me personally. I'm sure there's all sorts of different things that people. I mean, the way that you can get into the numbers of this game is insane. So like that's the other big thing is it's hooking a lot of people that I didn't see any of these other types of games get because of how surfaced the numbers are and how much fun and how manipulated they can truly become, depending on what you pick up and when you pick it up. I mean, like, right, like I've gotten to a point where I don't fill out all of my slots for like the majority of the run, and then towards the end when I know that like I better start picking something now or else it's just all going to turn into money bags or chicken, like then I will like just go hardcore on something, whatever comes up, right? So it's always kind of like it's like a weird like lottery aspect to it, and I don't have to play it that way. I could just pick up enough stuff to fill up all of those slots and then just upgrade everything as I go. But what that style allows me to do is maximize. I think I've been able to up to 3 different weapons I've been able to evolve, and then I know later I'll be able to do that even more because there's like achievements for evolving all 6, I think, and stuff like that. But like for right now, what I can do is it allows me to evolve up to 3 weapons, and then just dump all of my shit into something like luck or maybe it is money bags, or maybe it's health, or maybe it's something right towards the end. I won't know. It gives it a little bit of a what's the word I'm looking for? It gives it a little bit of variety and a little bit of mystery, as opposed to like going in planning like, all right, I'm going to aim for these specific things, because I know that that's how some people play it too. Yeah, it's really wild what this game is allowing the community to do within it, all completely without having to, this is all surface level stuff within the game.
Yeah. It is. And then the mods that are out, one of the mods I like, and I kind of wish that they would implement it into the actual game, is
the best kind of mods, yeah.
The differential of what each chest represents with color. So like if it's just gonna be a chest that's gonna give you an upgrade from one of the weapons that you already have, it'll look like the basic chest. But if it's one of those chests that could evolve a weapon, if it's a high enough level, it shows up as like a golden chest. And I dig that because, as you just said, where sometimes you wait to pick that stuff up, sometimes I want to leave that chest there until I'm at a high enough level where when I pick it up, it's going to evolve one of my weapons.
See, that's really interesting, and this is starting to get really deep into it. Yeah. And this is what happens with this game, is like, that's really interesting because that implies that the randomization is actually being the lever for randomization is being pulled when the chest is generated, not when you pick up the chest, which is how I thought it happened. I thought it was just dependent on what you already had, so I wasn't picking up some of those chests because I thought, well, I can upgrade through leveling to this point, and then I'll pick the chest up and it'll have the evolution in it. But if that chest has already had this thing decided in it, how does that work?
Well, what's decided in order to color the what's decided in it is if it will evolve the weapons or not. It does not say what it's tied to. It's the fact that evolution chests on the Mad Forest and the Inlaid Library do not start to spawn until after the 10-minute mark.
Mm-hmm. Or until after you have the certain levels, though, right? Like, because you can't evolve a weapon until it's a certain level, right?
Right, but if you were able to get your knife, say, as an example, up to level 8, and then by the 5-minute mark, picking up a chest is not going to evolve your knife.
Right.
You need to wait until after the 10-minute mark when the chests are generated that can evolve.
But what if you're only at But if you're only at level 5 at the 10-minute mark, then the chests are not going to pop evolutions for the knife.
Right, exactly.
You need to wait.
But that's
so what happens if all you have is the knife, right? Like, say all you have is the knife, you're level 5, a chest generates, but you don't pick that chest up. You evolve that knife to level 8, then you pick that chest up. It can't have an evolution for the knife in it because it was generated back when it was level 5.
No. It will have the evolution.
How can they color the chests?
Because
how can they
because the coding for the chest is whether or not it's a regular chest or it's an evolution chest. It doesn't determine what's inside of the chest until you pick it up. But it couldn't
spawn an evolution chest if you were at level 5, right?
No, because the coding to spawn the evolution chest is based on time, not based on what you have. The
But if you're at
10-minute.
level 5 and it's after 10 minutes, so an evolution chest can spawn,
Yep.
it still won't because you can't evolve anything in your hand.
No, but it's still an evolution chest because the item that you are given is not generated until you pick up the chest. But the coding for that chest says evolutions of items are in the pool.
Okay. Okay. Okay.
Yeah. So that's it.
Yeah,
So
this is what I mean is like like figuring out exactly how all of this stuff
yeah,
works so that you can maximize your experience, right? Like
yeah,
maximizing this game is the game, right? And so in that regard, hitting those moments where you've maximized the game, that particular run, I won't say the
yeah.
game, but you've maximized your experience in that particular run. I am frequently hitting a point where I'm doing that with still like 10 to 15 minutes left in the run and no way to just skip to it. Like skipping to the boss battle or even just a fast forward button or something to that regard. Now, part of the reason that the fast forward in particular probably doesn't exist is it's already a GPU melter, right? Like it already has the potential to get kind of overburdensome for some devices. So in that regard, fast forward would probably not be a good thing to add, right? But man, just give me the ability to just be like skip to the fight or skip to the end or something in those particular moments because I'm running into that so much that I'm hitting these lulls while playing, and that's my only big real criticism about the game so far is that like despite everything, despite all the fun that I'm having most of the time, there's too many moments where like I could get up and go to the bathroom while this game plays itself, and that's teetering on the edge of not worth my time when I've got other games in this style that don't do that for me.
So what I'm going to say, right, is get the map and then get to Gallows Tower and get one of the items there. I won't tell you which one. And then talk to me about this exact criticism that you have.
All right, is that the Elo Misa thing or something that I'm supposed to be unlocking next?
The what?
Well, the 5 levels, like there's not one called Clock Tower, so I don't. So I'm trying to make sure I know what you're talking
It's
about.
Gallows Tower is the fourth one. The Ilmalese, you've probably
Ilmalese,
already
yeah.
unlocked the Ilmalese.
So the
If
five.
if you've gotten to level 30,
So I've got to the dairy. So I've got to the dairy planet.
Yep.
Number 4 is titled Ilmalese, and number 5 is titled Green Acres.
Yeah. So you've unlocked Ilmalese and Green Acres, which are technically bonus stages. Those.
Oh, that's why it's showing those as the
Yeah,
stages
that's because you unlocked those when you got to
Okay.
the 30-minute mark. In every time you get to a 30-minute mark in a stage, you unlock one of the bonus stages, and there are 5 of those to unlock because there are 5 main stages. So like
Okay.
it's not showing
But
you
it's just
Gallows
not showing
Tower
me everything
until
that's
after
okay.
you pass the requirement to unlock it in the dairy plant, which is right there on the unlockables. I believe it's get your character to level 60.
Mhm.
And that's it. But also, once you get the map, that opens up a whole another like chunk of game too. And it's like it's really interesting to me how Vampire Survivors, because I was right where you are. I was the type of person who's like, man, I'm just gonna keep playing the library, and because I know the library, there's not a lot of like secrets there. It's fairly easy to do because it's a contained space. And like, I guess I'm just gonna get all the money, unlock all the characters, and then I'll be done with it. And then I tried the dairy plant, which another interesting thing about the dairy plant, I think it's written in the flavor text for it, but if not, semi-spoiler for you, Sejin, and for the listener. Every single chest in the dairy plant is an evolution chest. So that one removes the 10-minute like lock before those start showing up.
Excellent.
So that's a cool thing. And then like the way that is like to go back to that mod, so like even after evolution chests start being added to the pool in the library and the Mad Forest, occasionally one will drop that will only give you an upgrade to one of the other things that you have. So like it could be the 11-minute mark, you get the chest and it's not that gold, it's back to brown, and you're like, oh, okay, well I can pick this one up and I'm not wasting the chance to evolve one of my weapons.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're not losing out on that because you've got everything leveled up.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like kind of I think that there's supposed to be this kind of like what's the word I'm looking for? Like slot machine-esque like element, right?
Yeah.
To some of it. So I I do like the idea of knowing what's in the chests for like me personally, but like at writ large as like as gameplay goes, I feel like that's kind of antithetical to like what they're doing. Like maybe making that a later down the line lock upgrade, right? Where like you can tell what's in chests. Like you know chests are now different colors or something that you unlock, right? Because that feels like something that after a certain point having that would definitely matter, but right now there's a lot of fun to be had in kind of the gambling nature of,
Oh yeah.
well, do I pick that chest up or do I let it sit for a little bit? I mean, I really could use an upgrade, but if I level my character up a little bit more in say like 2 minutes, then I could come back and get that chest. The problem there then is I need to make sure I don't lose track of where that chest is. Luckily they put a big old arrow on it most of the time, but I don't even I don't even clock that sometimes.
Yeah.
There's so much going on screen.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. It's a risk reward type system the way that it currently is. But just to differentiate, yeah, and it could be an item later on. Lord knows they've been adding items later on. The newest
Right.
one that was just added to the beta is a seal that allows you to seal off up to 10 items in the collection so that they just don't show up in the game.
Oh, is that the
So,
banish thing that I just got, or
so
is that something else?
banishing is in the game. Say something comes up and you're like, I'm never going to pick the clover as one of my support items. I'm going to
Right.
banish it. So then like it's not coming up as an option.
It's not in the. It's
Yeah.
not. Yeah, it's not in the pool.
So if you, to unlock the seal, which is a late game item, you have to earn 10 banishes, and it's completely possible to earn that many banishes as the game goes on, and banish 10 weapons in a run. And then once you do that, you get the seal, and then that allows you to go into your collection and be like, I don't ever want to see crosses. I don't ever want to see rune tracers anymore. So that like
Yeah.
you get pre-banishment, and I'm very excited for that and what
Yeah,
that
and
could mean to the game.
the other big one that this makes me think of, and especially when you start talking about like being able to really manipulate like the items that are going to be available to you in the randomization, is I start thinking about things like Loop Hero and Necrodancer and stuff like that. And what's interesting is how those also kind of really borrow from that 8-bit style as well. It's just cool. Like the style of Vampire Survivors also on its own is also just something to be seen. It's like you cannot help but have these like feelings of like Castlevania evoked and things like that as you're playing, no matter what character.
Yeah. And the game started out with an asset pack of like Castlevania sprites. That's how Ponsel put the game together initially. And then once it started to get big, he hired sprite artists in order to create like actual sprites that are part of the game. So what you're seeing is like the complete package. Everything is drawn and owned by the guy who made the game. And then but like I have earlier builds where like the whip guy just kind of looks like Trevor Belmont.
Yeah, yeah.
And where the items are the big thing. Like the Santa water, the holy water that you get, it was literally just the icon of holy water from Castlevania.
Nice.
When I first got into the game. So it's been
Nice.
really interesting to see the art style grow and evolve along with it. It's just as a good time. And you do need to understand, like, I am playing it, I'm talking about it as a top level player who's put in a lot of, like, time and effort to figure things out, like, chests don't spawn until the 10th minute, and, like, the 11th minute will always be a chest that has this. Like, that's what happens if you play the game. I think Steam says I've played it for over 200 hours, and that's not even counting, like, some of the other time that I've played on it.
Yeah, especially because you played in other places. Yeah.
And then bringing it like to the other side, taking that knowledge to the Xbox console, like I'm fairly certain that the game has some huge glitches in it right now in terms of the randomization, because the Hollow Heart has just never shown up for me after unlocking it.
Oh, I was gonna say you have to unlock it first though, but
Yeah.
but yeah,
But you
okay.
unlock
you
it
have
by
unlocked
like
it.
surviving for 5 minutes.
5 minutes or
time you
something.
save
Yeah,
for-
it's like, yeah.
So it's like it's something that should be in my pool relatively early, and it's in my collection. But I've been playing on Xbox all weekend, and I mean, one of the things that I love is having the whip and evolving it into the bloody tear. First of all,
yeah.
because then you get to sing Bloody Tear from Castlevania, and that Castlevania 2, the Simon's Quest, let's credit where credit's due. And I just have fun doing that, like being an obnoxious bastard going, Bloody Tear, I got that bloody tear. and just having a good time.
But it's also pretty detrimental to a lot of the builds that I create, because at some point I just want to be able to just walk through crowds and pick stuff up, right? And so being able to heal as you do damage is like a huge boon in that regard.
Right, but that's what the Bloody Tear does.
Right.
You said detrimental.
Oh, I meant important.
Yeah. Detrimental means bad.
Yeah, no, I understand,
like,
Devin.
yeah.
I got there. I picked up on the context clues you were laying down.
Yeah, no, it is a very important item, especially early game before you have a lot of the other stuff, like the power up that lets you, like before you power up your recovery, so that like you're actually gaining back health all this time, or other items you get that do help in health recovery, or you have like 4 revivals. Eventually, there's an item that gives you multiple revivals. Like before that stuff is active to you, the Bloody Tear is a lifesaver. And the fact that I've done, let's say, 10 runs in this thing and never had it come up, and I'm talking runs that got to like the 30-minute mark,
Yeah.
and it never showed up, it makes me wonder if there might be some glitch in it showing up. Also, the Rune Tracer, I have not had the Rune Tracer show up at all in any of these runs, and
I've only just unlocked the Rune Tracer because I just played with that guy last night, and I like the weapon. But since playing with him, it has shown up in 2 other runs, I think.
Yeah,
with other characters and stuff.
It's strange. I'm like, it's weird that this isn't showing up, because there was a time where I'm like, I really don't want the Rune Tracer, guys. Thank you so much for offering it to me, but it's not the item that I want. To the fact that I would use my banishment on it, because just based on the nature, the Rune Tracer is fantastic in something like the library where there's a set up and down, but then like with how big the dairy plant is, and then like other later levels, it doesn't have the same punch or panache as it does when there's like only a certain area that enemies can be in. So I'm like, you're good, but you're not good for this usage. I haven't had that show up. And then the big one, you've gotten the pentagram, right? I think the pentagram shows up after 20-minute survival.
Yeah, the pentagram is one of those ones where I'm glad I knew some of the stuff that happens with it eventually, because when you first get the pentagram, that is truly detrimental to what you're doing. Like the punishment for taking the pentagram up front, like, is so severe, but the benefits of it later are insanely good. In fact, for a long time, that was the way to beat death. Like really, really early days of this game, when the pentagram had first come out, people figured out that you could glitch death in the library level to get like stuck in like a piano, and then what you needed to do was upgrade your pentagram to the point where it would eliminate everything on stage, right? And then get him stuck in the piano, and then that's how people were like defeating him like really early on. The pentagram is insane.
Yeah. And then they fixed that one, and then it was the Rune Tracer with the character who everything becomes larger, and it was keeping her at level 3 the entire game, and then beating death because his HP is based upon your level when he spawns.
Interesting.
So like, it's cool stuff. I mean, things have changed, and again, I don't want to spoil that for you either, because the proper ways to kill death are awesome. What they added to the game is awesome, especially if you're a Castlevania nerd. But yeah, sorry.
Closest I got is I evolved the Clock Lance up like crazy, and I had a couple of revives as that character that can gain revives as they So using him with the Clock Lance like way up, also a bunch of garlic. Garlic is also one of my big go-tos, and so I froze death like 5 or 6 times a revive. So I was like doing like insane amounts of damage. The problem is just that there's just too much HP. Right?
I mean, at the time when I defeated death using the Rune Tracer exploit, the idea was that it was 63,000 HP for every level your character had.
Right. It's just an insane
So
level of HP, right?
yeah.
Yeah. So I knew I was never gonna win, but I was surprised how long I lasted. I think that run ended up being a 34-minute run, which was insane for me. I don't think I've ever gone longer than like 31 minutes otherwise.
Cool. I hope it was in. Oh, no, you don't have the item that will make that matter yet. God, there's so much in this game that you don't have yet. But what I will talk about, just going back to the Xbox version of it, is I had a pentagram run last night where none of the uses of the pentagram eliminated the items on screen.
Oh,
Like,
I mean,
I'm
good for
talking
you.
like the chances of that happening, the math and the statistics of that happening is near impossible. And I'm like, I don't want to talk about it until I evolve it into the gorgeous moon. And then once I did it, I'm like, I cannot believe that I went through an entire pentagram chain without a single gem being destroyed. And then I started to wonder, oh my God, is it glitched too? To the fact that like the biggest detriment of this item has been removed from it. And then like after 2 other runs or with the pentagram, nothing was being erased. Finally, something erased by it, and I'm just like, nope. I just had insane luck with this item. Apparently, like what the fuck?
I mean, maybe your luck was really high because that also affects that.
That does affect it. No, I didn't have high luck as the character. I was like Devin luck coming into the game. I don't know. But like, so I think there might be just like some small issues with the console build right now, especially because I need that hollow heart. And the fact that I'm not getting hollow hearts really bothers me.
Yeah, yeah.
All right. Any other things on Vampire Survivors, or do you want to slip over to something else? Slip, slide, and away.
No, I mean, so just some other stuff that I've been playing in between
Yeah.
my stuff on Vampire Survivors is I also picked up a new puzzle game that's just came out called A Little to the Left, and the only reason I really wanted to bring this up is that it feels like the lo-fi of video games. Like it is just like super chill, super easy to like bounce in and out of. I can get stuck on a puzzle for 20 minutes, but it doesn't ever feel like aggravating. Like I've only had to look up one answer, and it was because I was missing something on screen that was clearly happening, and I just wasn't registering what that like meant. It's hard to talk about this game. It's hard to talk about this puzzle game because it's not traditional puzzles, and it's not a common mechanic through all of them. So on one level, you could be just straightening pictures on a wall. Then in the next level, you might have to organize books on a shelf, right? And there's not really like a common theme between the two, other than just like shapes and colors sometimes get grouped together, and sometimes you're not even grouping things. Sometimes you're like tracing a line. Sometimes it's all little puzzles that just feel very, very chill vibe to it. So it's just been really wild going between intense, insane runs of Vampire Survivors or even Bounty of One or Brotato and stuff like that, and like having like being tense for up to 30-40 minutes at a time, and then needing to come down from that. So then I pop on my lo-fi game and I play that for a little bit. And that's kind of my up and down on Steam for the last week or two.
I love it. I absolutely love it. Here's what I'm going to say though. I am taking away your Brotato and your Bounty of One until you have the map. Don't play anything else. Focus on VS.
I mean, I sure. I bet I could get the map within 10 minutes after it's finishing.
I really hope you do, but it will change the game for you in ways that I think are necessary. Things you've talked about that will become clear to you, and I want you to get that enjoyment. We're also going to talk about games we're playing. Originally, before the untimely passing of Conroy and Gallagher, this episode was going to be called the Frontiers Report, because I knew I was going to dump just a plethora of time into Sonic Frontiers this week. And I have definitely done that. But then it also kind of felt like it might be in poor taste to call this the Frontiers Report, because the game is already dead. Price drop this morning. It is already $40. It has not been out for 7 days. It's been out for 5 days. You could go right now to any retailer and get a physical copy of Sonic Frontiers for $39.
So let's talk a little bit about the marketing and the awareness of Sonic Frontiers. I didn't know it was coming. When it first appeared on the stage for me, this is all from my perspective, was sometime over the summer. A preview came out for it that I didn't even recognize was a game preview. I thought it was one of those like, hey, we upraised Ocarina of Time into Unreal Engine 5 just to see what it looks like. Like I thought it was one of those kinds of videos on YouTube, and it took to the end of the video where it was like available later this year. I was like, oh shit, this is an actual thing. Like I had not heard about it up until I saw that preview that then was not structured very well like a preview. And then didn't hear another thing until we started talking about, hey, Sonic Frontiers is coming out later this month, and we were like, what? And then the fact that it came out and you put a week into it, completely forgot it even was out. That game has not made any effort to enter the consciousness of Sejin, and it sounds like maybe it had not made enough effort to be in the consciousness of anybody.
I mean, you say that on election day, right? It was November 8th when it dropped, and you couldn't go anywhere else to play it. And it also suffers from Horizon Zero Dawn syndrome, where the next day God of War Ragnarok came out. And that is the game that everybody played. But all of these people who enjoy platform games, the people who like really like big Super Mario Odyssey fans, who are like, this looks like Sonic's answer to Super Mario Odyssey, and in a lot of ways it is. Though I would compare it more to Kirby and the Forgotten Islands or the Forgotten Land. I'm not sure the title of that. I think wait, is it right here? Nope, that's Pokemon Arceus. I still don't know where my case for Kirby is. But that game, it's very similar to Kirby and the Forgotten Lands. More than
still owe me a Mario Party game.
I know I still owe you. I freaking got a Hall sensor joystick controller. The one that uses the magnets instead of the potentiometer. And like all I want to do is play Mario Party with you, and I don't know where my copy of Mario Party is. But yeah, so Sonic Frontiers came out on the 11th, and all of these people played it to the end. Like everybody was like, I'm going to 100% complete it. All these streamers, everybody I talked to about it was like, I need to beat it today so that I can play God of War Ragnarok unfettered. And what everybody found playing Sonic Frontiers is that this is a really good open world game. Like your brother had mentioned it in our Discord channel that he wants to make sure that Tears of the Kingdom has learned from other open world games, not just Breath of the Wild, but that it maybe takes some things from like Phoenix Rising and Sonic Frontiers into like ways to populate a world. Because the big thing that I really like about Sonic Frontiers is rather than have like, let's climb this tower, and once we climb the tower, we'll have a section of the map unlocked. There are little speed signs every so often that are marked with an M, and you have to solve a puzzle there to unlock an even smaller portion of the map. So it's like a puzzle to unlock a map that will show you other puzzles that you can solve. And dear God, is that more satisfying to me than like one big climb and then, all right, let's just go check off everything on the list. It really works for me.
I mean, it feels like it's just a small climb with a bunch of stuff to check off on a list as opposed to...
But it's not a climb, I will say that.
Right. Like it's puzzles. Different. It's right.
But then but what it really kind of unlocks is also the next sign to go to make a bigger map. But like if they did that with the shrines, like if you unlock a shrine and that populates the map around you with stuff to do in the overworld, I think I would be more hipped and like more excited to beating shrines.
See, I think the thing you got to remember about the towers is it's not just a climb for the majority of them. Like, yeah, out of the dozen that are in there, like 2 or 3 of them are just a climb. But don't forget that, like, there's like the one up in the mountains where all of the shit is buried under the water that you have to find, and then you have to build the tower yourself. Or there's the one that's covered in like the dark mess that you've got to like work your way around in order to get up, and that means that you've got to be stealthy and hide from guardians on certain levels. Like they turn those into puzzles as you go. Like there is a lot more puzzling mechanics to it, because like climb the tower and unlock parts of the map has been the Ubisoft special for years, right? Like Assassin's Creed, Far Cry, right? And it definitely is something worth noting that Breath of the Wild borrows heavily from that concept, but the way that it evolves that concept is it gives you different stuff to do. Like Far Cry, the most that ever changed was like, oh, now you have to do a lot of jumping in this one. Now you have to do a lot of like climbing. Now you have to fly to this one. But it's always still just a tower that you just have to get to the top of. In Breath of the Wild, there's this element to it where you have to figure out what the big like what's the word I'm looking for, obstacle is for this particular shrine, and then you have to get around that. And it's not always like I need to climb. In fact, some of them it's best to not just start climbing right away, because you've got to figure out the stuff that's going on the ground first so that you can actually get up the tower. And then at some point your climbing ability, due to various clothes you have and things that you can eat and all that sort of stuff, is nothing. Like you can climb up a tower in less than 10 seconds, like once you get to certain parts of that game. But because that's not it, that's not the gameplay loop of that tower, and I think that like it's sad to me when people talk about Breath of the Wild and you just climb towers and unlock the rest of the map, because there's so much more to towers than that. There's one tower that you straight up cannot find until you get to a certain point in the game and characters point you in a certain direction, and then you finally get down into a pit and you're like, oh, this tower is like buried underground essentially.
So I guess I need to play Breath of the Wild again because I don't remember any of that. I remember
Yeah, I
going
know.
and
You talk
climbing
about
up
Breath of the Wild a
towers.
lot, and you mentioned stuff from like the first like 30 minutes of that game that I'm just like, yeah, it definitely is like that in the first 30 minutes. But then the way that that game evolves, it is so not that after like your 30th hour of gameplay.
Yeah, I don't know. I just need to look at Breath of the Wild again. I guess I approached it differently, and I think that's a cool thing about it is that we've had vastly different experiences with the game.
Well, well, and
Like,
you approached it as somebody going directly from something like Link to the Past. So physical tools was really important to you, and they give those to you literally in the first 30 minutes of the game, and you were like, well, at this point I have all of the tools. And it's like, that's not, because the while those are important to getting around and getting through the shrines, those aren't what you end up using the most of later on. What you need to do is you need to defeat the big guys, the big guardians, so
the
that you can get the
divine
powers like Rivali's
beasts.
Gale.
Yeah,
Yeah, the divine beasts, so that you can get things like Rivali's Gale, which completely changes the way that you play the game. But it changes the ways that you can do certain shrine puzzles. It changes what you can do here. So yeah, like as somebody that it is all about the meta of that game. That is where they buried like the Zelda-ness of it all, like the link to the link to the past and all of that stuff. Like where you have physical tools that you use, that stuff is still very present. But what that game really excels at is then, after it's given you all of those tools, saying, okay, but that doesn't mean you can just get anywhere yet. You need to figure this shit out still. And like
I did like
that's
that with the clothes. I will give them credit for the clothing part of that. I just
Mhm.
I found a solution, and that solution generally worked for me. Like, I don't know. I need to play it again. I need to give Breath of the Wild another shot. It's a game that I finished and I enjoyed my time with it, but then like the way you talk about it, I'm like there's a whole other game there that I just missed cuz I stayed surface level. And I don't know. I it's very interesting to me.
Yeah, you can. I mean, we've talked about this before. There are people that play that game that can finish it in 15 minutes, and there are people that have been playing that game for so long that they have thousands of hours in it. So, like, you could be the kind of person that does this in 15 minutes, or you could be the kind of person that does it in thousands of hours. That game will give you both. But if you're looking for more to do in that game, it is there, right? It's just that it doesn't push you into it, which is interesting. That like that's where you kind of feel like, well, the game didn't ever really make me do those things. But that's been the biggest argument about open world games for a while, is that you find yourself in this position where you're being forced to do a bunch of side shit you don't want to be doing. You just want to get going with the story. So Breath of the Wild tries to combat that, and then that ends up being one of the things that doesn't work, right? Is I am endlessly fascinated by Breath of the Wild, in that the ways in which people are still figuring shit out in it, and now we're about to get a second one that people are hopefully going to get even further in. Right? It's wild how much stuff has. I mean, I'm still learning stuff about that game. I was watching something the other day on YouTube about clothing benefits, and they kind of tell you about some of them, but there are some hidden ones that you wouldn't know unless you've been playing the game so much that you realize, like, oh, that seemed to only take 2 arrows that time. What changed? I figured out the other day, like I was running around and I was like, why can I suddenly see health bars? And then I remembered way, way back when I first started playing this game that one of the big things about a particular piece of clothing you get is it allows you to see enemy health bars. But like, I was told that and found that out 4 years ago, and then like have played the game on and off since, to the point where I straight up forgot that's what was going on. So it took me a half an hour of like changing shit around, like changing my weapons, changing my clothes, eating certain food, trying to figure out what was allowing me to see health bars and what wasn't. And then once I unlocked it and figured it out, now I have this whole thing where I'm like, oh, I need to upgrade this tunic now, because like this is the thing that's allowing me to do this, and I actually really like that. But I also have not paid any fucking attention to this piece of clothing, so I need to go out and hunt down all the material to upgrade this immediately. Like, and that's what I've been doing now in that game for the last like 2 or 3 days.
Cool. Very cool. I don't know. Maybe I'll do it. Maybe that'll be my lead up to Pokemon, because I'm stupid excited for Pokemon this week. But also, I have Sonic Frontiers, which is appealing to me in the way that the open world works and the way that the speed works. But I have to say this. I said that Sonic Frontiers is dead because of the fact that it has now already gotten the price break before it has been out for even 5 days. It's been out for 5 days.
I'm glad you found a community of people that are playing it, because besides you,
nobody is playing
Zach,
it anymore.
I don't know.
Nobody is playing it anymore. You need to understand that a community played that game, and then the next day, God of War Ragnarok came out. And if you finished Sonic Frontiers, you were done with Sonic Frontiers, and if you didn't, you were still done with Sonic Frontiers. Like, there's a
well, that's
reason.
what I mean when I say that, like, that game has done such a poor job of making itself present in the world for me, and it sounds like for a lot of people, because it seems like that game came out and was instantly forgotten, which is not fair, because by all accounts, everyone I've heard that's played it has really enjoyed their time with it. And again, it seems to just be you and Zach, but like that's a pretty good argument for me, at least, that I will enjoy some of my time with it, right? But that being said, like, I hear these great things going on in this Discord group and nowhere else. It's just like, okay, this game is something's not going right for this game.
So let me allow you to reveal something that's not going right for me. Spoilers for Sonic Frontiers. If you're one of the people who still wants to play it, maybe you picked it up for $40 and you're like, hey, let's pass the time before Pokemon comes out. One of the things that you have to do in the game is collect the Chaos Emeralds, right? Mm-hmm. And like, that's a big part of the game. It's not like a bonus thing. In order to progress the story, you need to collect the Chaos Emeralds. And in the first island, there are 4 vaults where there are Chaos Emeralds. They are very easy to see, easy to locate, and whenever you collect enough items to open up the vaults, it shows you where they are on your map, right? It is pushing you in the direction of finding these Chaos Emeralds. Mm-hmm. Once you find those 4 Chaos Emeralds, though, there are no more vaults, and you're like, well, what am I supposed to do for the last 3 Chaos Emeralds? The secondary part of the game is to find Sonic's lost friends. And on the first island, that is Amy Rose, the pink lady hedgehog, introduced in Sonic CD. And you find her, and you are collecting this whole time little heart-shaped items, heart-shaped coins, and you give them to Amy. There's a certain amount that you need to give to her to reactivate her memories. And then it becomes a find Amy as she moves around the island, like fetch quest sort of thing. And through that, like, chase that went on for it was 11 different interactions I had to have with Amy Rose. Every so often, what you do in the Amy Rose section would reward you with a Chaos Emerald. Like, just kind of heggity-peggity, too. Like, there was no rhyme or reason behind it. It's like, oh, you collected all of this thing's babies. Here's a Chaos Emerald. What? Why did this thing have a Chaos Emerald? Why was there no indication that this is how I had to get the Chaos Emerald? What? Like, what?
Yeah.
So I don't love that. And I didn't love so 3 of the emeralds have to be done with this whole storyline of Amy. And I've gotten to the second island, and it's Knuckles who's the friend on that island. And I'm like, so I got to do this Knuckles thing, all right, for at least 3 emeralds. I don't even know. And that kind of bummed me out, because the whole loop of playthrough levels, completing the challenges in the levels, that gives you keys, and those keys unlock the way to get Chaos Emeralds, really appealed to me. It appealed to me the same way that Sonic.
And they tied the rest to narrative, and Devin was out.
But it's not even no, I can tell you, the narrative is more tied to those levels. Mm-hmm. The Amy Rose stuff feels secondary.
Yeah.
It was oh, I didn't like. I'm like, oh, well, I'll find Amy eventually, and I thought like it's just like, please collect these things so I can get my memory back. And I'm like, well, that feels like the side quest, having to go into the actual numbered levels and complete the levels, and each level has 4 challenges, and it's like find the 5 red coins, beat it in under X amount of minutes, things like that. That appealed to me, and that really felt like the thing because it was opening up more of the island and more of the exploration. And Amy felt like she was going to be the side quest, and it's like, no, we've combined both of these things into what is necessary. And I'm like,
Yeah.
Okay, cool, I guess. I wasn't prepared for that, but thank you. So, I mean, I haven't gone back since I got to the second island. I'll be honest about that. I probably will, though, because I have fun. Like, some of the cool little things that you can figure out, like, if you run in a figure 8 with the psi loop power that you unlock, you get an infinite boost, which is really cool. And I just did it, like, accidentally. I'm like, oh, let's make a figure 8. And then it's like, infinite boost unlocked. And I'm like, oh, that's cool. That's really cool. You only have it for a finite amount of time, but like still to be able to run at your fastest speed without any like payment or consequences is really cool. And the game looks gorgeous. And it's also kind of like Shadows of the Colossus with your Sonic the Hedgehog and you got to fight giant mechanized creatures. It's a lot of fun. And I gotta be honest with you, I thought I'd be pissed off when after beating the first island boss, the Chaos Emeralds shot away like the Dragon Balls, but I'm actually alright with that being the gameplay loop is on each of these islands having to find the 7 Chaos Emeralds again to become supersonic and then fight a giant creature.
So, I mean, like, in terms of the whole memories collection stuff, right? Like, which is, I mean, I'd be remiss because we talked about it earlier, but it is straight out of Breath of the Wild.
Except it's not 12. I have 92 for her in order to complete the whole thing. And I'm just like, and it's not like each one of them unlocks something. It's just like, we're going to call them memories. And it's like,
right.
Okay.
Yeah. But to that though, is the idea that that's supposed to be folded in while you're doing the other stuff, like while you happen to be going around and doing puzzles every now and then you find a memory, or is it set up that like once you start looking for these memories, that's what you're doing for the next 30 minutes, and then once you have those all collected, you can get back to the fun puzzles?
No, so there are the map puzzles where you solve a puzzle and it opens up a part of the map. And then on the map, there are the heart-shaped icons, which is generally a puzzle that you have to solve to get one of the memory pieces for Amy. Sometimes as a reward for a map puzzle, you'll also receive one of the memory coins. Sometimes, like, just running around, you'll randomly find them out in the world. They're kind of everywhere. I have to say that it is not hyper rigid in like what you have to accomplish. Honestly, on that first island, I only cleared 4 of the at least 7 levels. And I only say that because I beat 1-1, I beat 1-2, and then I beat 1-6 and 1-7. And I'm like, oh, okay. And that was enough for me to get all the Chaos Emeralds from the vaults. And then I'm like, well, now I don't know what to do. I don't know where to go. I guess I'll go talk to Amy Rose, because, you know, the game's been telling me to talk to Amy for a while. But it really felt like it was going to be one of those forced, like, here's a side quest you can do. Let's get back to the actual action. It didn't feel like it was going to be the actual action.
Yeah. It may be that it's intended to be folded more in with what you do, so it doesn't feel so bogged down in the collect and return type stuff.
Yeah,
I don't know.
Because then by the time
fetch quests are always a really weird one for me, because like on the one hand, like they feel like they really slow down every open world game ever, but the ways in which the fetch quests can teach you what certain materials can do, what certain characters are up to, like there is definitely like meta value to a fetch quest, but balancing that with like killing the gameplay loop that is very fun is a difficult thing we have found as open world games have continued to evolve, and fetch quests are still like the bane of everybody's existence.
So it was strange because by the time I talked to Amy, I had enough to activate every interaction with her. It was never I had to go and get more of the items. It was just through the other gameplay I had collected the stuff. And it's like, okay, so I guess that's just the thing. So now with Knuckles, like I already found Knuckles. I'm probably gonna speak to him to see what he wants from me, and then
Right.
I'll fold it better into how I'm approaching the game. But it was a real surprise to be like, oh, I got 4 of the Chaos Emeralds, because the game was like, you need to collect the Chaos Emeralds, and then it's like, but now there's no more Chaos Emerald. What am I supposed to do?
Yeah. Yeah, I am excited to try it, and especially now that it's dropped down to $40. It's a shame that it's just been kind of left in the wind. And I think that's just part of that is because of the curse of coming out the same weekend as Ragnarok. Although I'll be honest, I have not heard amazing things about that game either. I've seen definitely people enjoying it, but I've been seeing a lot of stuff about it getting bogged down and convoluted in a way that the I say the first one, but the last one didn't. So I'll be interested to hear what happens with the story of that there, because if Sonic Frontiers loses out to God of War, and then on top of that God of War ends up not even being that good of a game, like that's going to be so disappointing. Um,
I mean, yeah, I
but
haven't read any.
I also think part of this is also the curse of Sonic. I was going to say is the other side of it is unfortunately I just don't know if Sonic just has the guaranteed star power that he once did.
I don't disagree about the curse of Sonic. I will say this. I mean, at the end of the day, all they ever do is talk about Sonic 06. It could be a
Yeah.
good game or it could be a bad game. The thing that game journalists are always going to talk about is 06. And even though this game is it's good, I really enjoy this game. I'm still seeing the comparisons to it, and it's like, I don't know. But then to go back to Ragnarok, a game that I have not played, a game that I have no real desire to play, because God of War didn't really do it for me. Like I remember buying it when it came out and playing it and then just being like, this isn't fun. This isn't fun the way that like the original God of War trilogy was fun.
Yeah.
And I'm like, and that sucks to me. The things that I have seen, like everybody called Miles Morales Spider-Man a DLC. The fact that they're also calling God of War Ragnarok essentially a DLC is very scary to me, in terms of like, well, is that true? Like, how long is the game? Because the first game, by all accounts, was an epic.
Yeah.
Like, had just so much going on. Like, is it like it's really indicative and frightening for what it might mean about games going forward? Because that's sort of the same exact issue that was levied against Horizon Forbidden West, was the fact
See, and
that
I
like,
think Yeah, and I think in all three cases that you've mentioned, I think the biggest problem that I have with calling them quote like using that I don't love the slight of, oh, this is just a DLC, because I think where it's coming from is that there's not a lot of innovation in terms of controls or artistic style and stuff like that. So it just feels like, oh, this just feels like this is just more of the same. I,
but that's what you
there was a
want, right?
time,
That's a good
right,
sequel.
right. There was a time when that was what sequel games were. There were slight changes, but generally what they did was just take the first game, polish it, and then gave you the better version in the second game. Like that used to be the way that things went back in my day, right? But the idea of getting like Super Mario, and then getting Super Mario Brothers, which evolved things a little bit, like it. There is something, I don't know. We just don't do that anymore, right? And I think that that's a problem that we've also talked about with movies, right? Where if the sequel does not somehow top the original in every way, it is immediately written off as a failure. And that is so unfortunate, because there's so many times in which what the sequel is doing is literally just working with all of the stuff you loved in the first one and just giving you more of it because you enjoyed it so much in the first one. That seems to not be enough for people. And you can make arguments about like, well, why would I spend $60 more on just this content when I can just go back and play the original and all of this stuff? And that's fine, but those aren't the conversations people are having. They're talking about this stuff as if there has not been actual work put into this shit to like make a game that they know people will enjoy. And so they don't take enough risks to like possibly, but like who wants to take risks nowadays with the state of every industry? Like why would you in video games or movies or television like take huge risks if you don't have to? And as audience members, it comes back to that mentality that we always talk about, where fans feel like they are owed a certain amount of stuff in a new game. And part of that stuff they think they are owed is like a whole slew of new movements and new art and new style and new character. It's like, man, like pick one. Like I'd rather they make a game that they know is solid than do this innovation thing where then suddenly the game gets delayed for 3 years because it doesn't work quite right. And then when it does come out, it's a fucking mess for the first year that it exists. And then they finally fix it. But by that point, we're 4 years into knowing about this game. And as far as I'm concerned, I've moved on. Like I don't need that to be my game cycle anymore, guys. Like I'm okay with just a solid sequel that just does a little bit more of the same. I'm okay with that. And I don't know why we've kind of turned it into a negative.
I think it's two sides of the same coin. On the one hand, the fact that DLC exists and is as expensive as it is, it's very easy for people to make that comparison, especially when like DLC is essentially announced the day a game is released.
Well, I mean,
So
your game has to have DLC nowadays,
yeah,
right? So like, yeah,
so it's one
yeah,
of those situations where like the understanding of that DLC is what we used to expect from a sequel, where it's like it's just going to be more of what we know works, probably polished down, maybe one new like gimmick to make things feel different. It's more in the story. So like the issue is like Mega Man 2 is essentially a DLC of Mega Man, right? But we don't feel that way because DLC didn't really exist as a term to use. So it's kind
yeah.
of just the evolution of how you refer to games and their follow-ups now, and it's an unfortunate evolution of the language, but like what's more is when people are playing a game that they're so excited to play and then like that's their response to it, like I don't know how to feel about it. Like, again, I haven't played the game, but to hear that from people that Ragnarok just feels like DLC, that's really strange. Especially with something like God of War, where I will say that God of War 2, like, you fought the same, but the game felt very different in terms of where you were going, the upgrades that you unlocked, and then ditto going from 2 to 3, how that game changed and evolved.
Well, and I think the big thing to remember about the between one and two and three of God of War, there were also huge innovations in what the systems they
Could
were
do,
kind of
yes.
working on were doing, right? And that is also something that we don't really have anymore. Part of that is because things like I said before, why would you risk putting new systems out at this time, right? With everything going as it is, the PlayStation 5 already isn't selling, right? Like that kind, like we. So there's that regard, but also, we're also kind of possibly, maybe I'm not a huge, I'm not big on this information, so maybe I'm wrong, but it feels like we've plateaued a bit in some of this stuff in this regard, right? Like I don't know how much more we can try and eke out from these gaming systems in terms of visuals. Like definitely more in terms of processing, because that will always get better, but like how much more real are things going to look? At some point, we're going to just be playing a bunch of FMV games, right? Like, and I already did that. I play, like, I do that now on a regular basis. So, like, I'm already there in that regard too. So, like, there's this weird element to it where, like, we also kind of have to come to terms with the fact that, these are going to be the systems going forward, and they do what they do. Like, we can't really be we if there had been a huge system release, like if PlayStation 5 had hit humongous and everybody had one in their homes and this game came out and played like a PS4 game, that would definitely be something to talk about. But right now, that's just not the state of the world, right? And with God of War 4, is there like a way to
Five.
refer to it? It didn't have a
Well,
subtitle, right?
just God of War. I mean, you
Yeah,
could call
God
it
of
four. You
War.
can call it God of Four. I'm fine with that.
But if I'm not doing that. If God of War like came out on the PS4 and was what it was, right? Like, and this game is now out, and the PS4 is still the more dominant PlayStation game. Like, there's not going to be much difference between what it's doing. Because God of War also didn't come out early in the PS4's life cycle.
No.
Like, right? These are two games that came out pretty late in the PS4 life cycle, and PS4 is still the main PlayStation console out there for people. There's not going to be much wiggle room for what it can do in that regard. Narratively, on the other hand, there's a whole bunch of stuff and that kind of thing. So if they're saying that it feels like DLC and that, like, the story just feels like it's just retreading, or if they're saying it's DLC in that it's only a 20-hour game as compared to the 60 to 100-hour epic that the first one was, like, then that is definitely something that you can talk about and say, like, and that is where the Miles Morales stuff got kind of sticky, because there were people talking about how it didn't feel like it was a full experience because of things like length, but everybody else was saying, yeah, but the story is something special and something different that wouldn't fit into the original game. Like,
I mean,
it deserved its own experience on that. And that gets into really weird questions about, like, how much time should a game last in order for it to be considered a quote unquote game. And that's stupid, because there's some games that are 2 hours long that are some of the most beautiful experiences you'll ever have and definitely merit their own game. But if you were asked to spend $60 on it, you turn your nose up at it. Like, that, these are just like terrible conversations that developers find themselves in all the time and have for years.
I mean, the thing about Miles Morales, and I'm uniquely like keyed in to be able to like have this discussion, is the storyline is only about 8 hours of gameplay, but so is the storyline in the original Spider-Man game, where you get
Now that's an interesting conversation.
right. I mean, because one day I'm like, I'm just going to do the story missions in Spider-Man. I'm like, I'm just going to play through story mission wise, and it took me 8 hours to play through the full game, right? Start to finish, only doing storyline quests. And where that game becomes this huge, like, epic that everybody loves is in the side quests and everything else that is presented to you. And all of those are present in Miles Morales as well. So it's strange that Miles Morales, they look at it, and everybody's looking at it like, well, the story's only 8 hours. And I was like, yeah, but the story of the other game, like, and I had beaten the game before, right? So, like, even if it were 10 hours, like, the story is not the reason you're playing these games. You're playing these games to feel like Spider-Man. And both of them, like, blow that one out of the water. Like, you feel like Spider-Man when you're playing the games.
Well, and you feel like two different Spider-Man. I think
Yeah.
that's the bigger thing that was really lost in that whole conversation, is all of that shit about how it's just DLC. Like, picking up Miles Morales, like, you're playing a different character. Like, you have different moves, you have different there was more than enough in gameplay loop and narrative to justify the existence of Spider-Man. What was its full
Spider-Man
title?
Miles Morales, and then
Spider-Man's
just
Miles
Spider-Man.
Morales.
Yeah.
No subtitle or anything after that.
Miles
Right.
Morales was the subtitle.
Yeah, right, but not like, like Dawn of a New Era or some bullshit, Dawn of Justice. But like this idea being that there somehow needs to be this justification for this existence of this thing on its own, standing alone. And like the ways in which people really take that to heart is wild. I mean, like, look at what happened with Borderlands when they, for $10, separated out a piece of DLC that they were like, here, now you don't even need the base game. You can literally just pay a fraction of the price and just play this part to kind of get an idea of where our new one's coming from. And people got really shitty. And it's like, they didn't have to do that, guys. They could have just marketed the original game to you full price with the DLC package and said, "Hey, spend $100 to pay to play this one small section of the game to remind you of this." Or they could do what they did, which was separate it out, which was probably no easy task, because the ways in which you have to build skill trees and stuff in that game, like, really were dependent on you having 80 hours in the original game before you got to that before. Now you don't need that. Like, there was a lot of work put into just pulling out a piece of the game that already existed, and they still sold it at a cheap ass price to you, and you still heard people complain. So like, people are just always going to have these weird feelings and these weird complaints about what they're owed when a game comes out. And like, and it's hard to separate that from the actual criticism of a game when you're trying to decide, should I spend my money on this? Should I spend my time on this? And you gotta start filtering out some of the bullshit of people out there who are just like, oh, this game's not worth it because I was able to finish it in 4 hours. And like, if you said that to me about like Gone Home, I'd say like, yes, but it's $15 and it'll be 4 hours that will completely change your outlook on what gaming narrative should be going forward. Like, so just do it. But if that's your real thing, that you need a lot of time in a game, then there are games out there for you like that. Go buy Monster Hunter or something and spend the rest of your life in it. Like, that's fine. But that's just like, that's not a metric for me, right? My measuring stick is not the same as your measuring stick, clearly.
Yeah, I've never understood like how many hours a game, because I've played games where like it was 30 minutes, but I had a great time. And that means that like for 30 more minutes of my time, I can experience it again and try it again.
Yeah.
One of these ones that I did, right, Vampire Survivors, and its success has made me okay with like kind of trying out early access games. I don't think any game is going to have the same early access like run that Vampire Survivors had, but I tried out this game. It's called Ex-Zodiac. It's what I grabbed the last Friday before we recorded, so I guess the 4th of November. I don't need to math, right? And it's a Star Fox and like SNES style game, like graphic wise. I've
Nice.
played through that game 4 times, having like collecting everything, doing everything that I can. I still haven't wrung everything I can out of that game because like there's a whole achievement to get S ranking in all 6 of the levels. I'm nowhere near S ranking any of those levels. And like for 2 of the levels, I've been able to kill every single enemy that shows up on screen. But like I can't do it without getting hit, which is what also goes into your rating. I can't do it and then defeat the boss in like a minute. So like there's still gameplay there to be wrung out from it. Ex-Zodiac
Yeah.
is fantastic, and just keep an eye on it. My favorite part is that you can control it with your mouse, and then that's just excellent. It's
Fu-
almost like a shooter.
Nice.
Yeah.
Phone games really fucked us. Like
Yeah.
I think there was a huge flip in gamer mentality where it used to be back in like the 90s, or the 80s and the 90s and the early 2000s even, where it was I'm playing this game because this is what we can afford to have right now, and we only have 3 games in the house, and it's the only one I haven't finished, so I'm just going to play this game to the end. And a lot of people have really weird experiences with games that not everybody has experiences with because they were just the ones that were available to them, right? Like for me, I think the one that I always bring up that I put a ton of time into that nobody else seems to have ever played is Alfred Chicken, Super Alfred Chicken.
I hate
like
that
like
game.
it,
Hate
it-
that game.
but I have these really fond nostalgic memories of that game and put so much time into it because like that was just a game that was available at the local pharmacy to rent, like of all of the games that were there. They also had the Tom and Jerry the movie game, and I played a lot of that too, that I don't know too many people that have spent too much time on that. Like there's those weird games that I've got this love and this memory for because they were just the games that we had. Versus now we live in the time of the video game graveyard. Everybody has one in their house where they have a pile of games that the majority of them they have not finished. Some people even have some stuff that they haven't even opened that are in this pile of games that they're just looking at every day, and then they still scratch their head and say, I don't know if I have anything to play today. And like I'm guilty of that too. I'm putting on this dumb voice and acting like that because that's literally what I am on a regular basis. I look at my pile of PS4 games, my pile of Switch games, I look at my Steam list, and I still sit here and think, I'm bored. I can't find anything I really want to do today. And it's just like that's insane that this is what we've evolved to in my lifetime. Is we've gone from a time when like we had 3 games in the house and you played them and you loved them to this. And again, we just sound like old men yelling at clouds at this point, but in that regard, it also kind of came hand in hand with this whole idea of every game has to do something for us now because so many games can have our attention if this game isn't hooking us immediately. And again, I go back to my but it's kind of true. Is I think the big thing was that once we all had a gaming console in our pocket and had the ability to go and play insanely like well detailed and made games that could draw our attention, and we could be playing a different game every week because phone games just come out and just nonstop. It's just a nonstop flow of possible new experiences, and the majority of them are free. And then you play until they ask you for money, and then you erase that and you move to the next one. Like we have this ability now to filter through video games as fast as we want. You could even point to like flash games and stuff like that as well, like also being part of this. Although those are already dead, so I don't really want to kick a dead horse. But the idea being that our access to fun gaming experiences has grown tenfold in such a short amount of time, 100-fold, a millionfold in such a short amount of time, has really numbed us to the idea of like, yeah, this one's a little bit of a slog for this, but once you get to this point, it's really fun, so it's worth it because again, it's the only game you have in the house, so you might as well push through to that. And sometimes you didn't find that moment. Sometimes you got really pissed because you bought a game that you thought was supposed to be something and it turned out to be something different, or the game was just not grabbing you as much as you thought it was. My dad, we had 3 games when I was growing up in the house. We had Super Mario Brothers, Link to the Past, and Civilization for the Super Nintendo. And my dad played the shit out of Civilization. I never did. I've tried playing it once, but I was like, this game is dumb and never went back to it. Now, knowing what I know now, I wish I had put more time into it then when I was 7, but I just wasn't interested then, right? But I put that game in more than once, started it up, played for 20 minutes, and walked away because again, I already played Link to the Past a bunch. I already played Super Mario a bunch, so I just wanted something different.
Yeah. I feel that. In fact, a couple of things to end it on, and then we have one other topic I'd like to transition into. But it'll be a quick topic because I don't want to go too deep into it.
Hmm.
Um, is some interesting stuff about Mega Man was revealed this past week, and the reason why that was revealed is Mega Man 11 is now the highest selling Mega Man game, with around 1.61 million copies sold.
Man, no shit.
Yeah, but so that's 1.61 million. I mean, that's a lot. That's still a million games, right? What game in the Mega Man franchise, and we're just talking Mega Man, right? I don't know if X is counted into it, but let's just talk Mega Man 1 through 11. What
I
do
was
you
gonna say
think
X.
the next highest game is sales wise in the
Probably
Mega
Mega
Man?
Man 2.
It is Mega Man 2 with
Yeah.
1.56 million.
Because as we talked about earlier in the episode, it was just a perfection of the formula of Mega Man 1. And so, by all accounts, the better game, but it is also the truly most original of original games, right? For
Yeah.
Mega Man.
Yeah, I mean, it takes one is a wonderful proof of concept, and two takes that proof of concept and makes it something that is fun. As someone who loves Mega Man 1, Mega Man 2 is
Yeah.
a lot more fun than it,
Yeah, and
especially
that
with
is
the
something
password system.
that has been true throughout games. I mean, even like look at like Super Mario Galaxy and then Super Mario Galaxy 2 and stuff too, right? Like that is still something that happens in games,
Yeah.
and I love that. I'm sad that we've missed that. But
Hmm.
sorry, Mega Man 2 is making a bunch of money, or
The
no,
Mega Man
not.
2 made a bunch of money, 1.56 million sold, right? So, I mean, it's when they look at it cuz it's like, well, obviously once Mega Man 11 had 1.54 million sold, it's like, yes, that's true, but they don't record it every day, right? There's not some
Hmm.
database that has a number tick up every time a copy is sold. They go like every 3 months and look at sales. That's how quarterly earnings work, dad. Um but it was this real moment for me because like Mega Man feels like an iconic part of my childhood, right? And I have found
Yeah.
so many other people who have similar stories about the character, and then to realize that like the number one selling Mega Man game for, let's see, that came out in '89, so 33 years was Mega Man 2. Despite all of the sequels that
Yeah.
came
Yeah.
out, the number one selling game for 33 years was still Mega Man 2. And then Mega Man 11 to get to that point, like that took it 4 years of being on the market. Like it's crazy. It's just
Yeah.
but you think about just like how iconic Mega Man is, and it's like those were just because the people around you or you yourself had that one Mega Man game at home. It was one of your 3 games. But in
Right.
the grand scheme of things, that's not even touching the sales of like Mario games, right?
Right.
Or the sales of Zelda games. It's nuts. It's just like it totally took this thing that always seemed very big to me and made it so much smaller. The fact that Mega Man 2 is the highest selling game until this year. I don't, and it's something that I wanted to share in terms of that whole 3 game mentality. And then
Yeah.
finally, the big issue with Ragnarok, right? Parsing through everything is the fact that it is held back by the fact that it also had to release on PS4. That thing you said about there not being that grand new game system, even though we're in the 9th generation of gaming, because it was so hard to get them, everything is still backwards compatible to the Xbox One and the PS4. And that is what is really holding back any sort of grand innovation in
Well,
terms of
again,
these
nobody wanted to take
systems.
the major risk of cutting that stuff off.
Yeah.
As shitty as like, remember when the Xbox One came out and they were talking about being always online, and somebody, I think it was Phil Spencer, somebody asked Phil Spencer like, what do you say to those people that don't have internet access and can't always be online? And he said, I would say to those people that they can buy an Xbox 360, right? Like I'm paraphrasing. I actually think it was worse than that than
No,
what
it
I
was
just
pretty
said.
much that though. That's what.
But it was
Yeah.
pretty much exactly that. Is he's like to them, I would say, buy yourself an Xbox 360, and it's like, motherfucker, you can't put out this new system and talk about all this innovative and like and specific stuff you're going to do for that system, and then say, or you could just buy the old one because the old one's not going to get that kind of care and attention. And I think that they learned a bad lesson from that, and they were just like, oh, I guess we need to keep focusing on the old one, and they didn't want to take that risk with the new Xbox, and the same goes for PlayStation. They didn't want to cut off a whole bunch of people, so there was this whole weird element to it where it's like I just don't feel like I need a new system to play games. The Xbox is winning more in that regard just because of some of the stuff that they've set up in terms of the online aspect of it. And PlayStation is trying to get there, but they've shot themselves in the foot in that Xbox had that plan before they made their new system, so their new system is very much geared towards it. PlayStation did not have that directive, so their new system is not exactly specifically designed to just be an online like entertainment system. It has that capability, but they always intended you to buy physical games, and now they're in this weird spot where that just isn't a thing anymore, right? I guess not physical games, but they did expect you to go and buy codes to then download the games.
Yeah, it is very strange how that whole thing shook out, and I don't know, but it is, everybody is saying that the Xbox Series S is the one that's holding back the games from being great in Gen 9, and then something like Ragnarok comes out and everybody being like, wow, this just looks like a PS4 game. And it's like, it's because it is a PS4 game. You can still play it on PS4. I understand where you're coming from with that. And also, why would they focus on the PS5 market, which is admittedly a smaller pond, when, like, if we get it out to PS4, that's more sales right there.
At least not on God of War. Like when
Yeah.
when God of War, you want it to be available to the most number of people, and like you could argue then make that one the system, like the killer
Make
app,
it the
right?
system
Like make
seller.
that
Yeah.
one the system seller, but they're not in a position to
Do that. Yeah.
force that hand right now, which is unfortunate because like I'd like them to prove me wrong. I'd like them to take a huge risk and do something, but I also completely understand why they just won't.
Mm-hmm. It's sad. It's a strange time to be a fan of gaming, and it is, and this has been a weird moment in that time and that space. Cause yeah, I don't know. You would think that God of War, we got to make this one the system seller, but that's what they said about Forbidden West, and then they ended up welching on that and going on both systems. Like, I mean, like, which also to me, I look at it and it's like, how advanced was it going to be for PS5 if it's like 2 months before the game release and you're like, you know what, we're releasing it on PS4 too. So have you guys been working on it as a PS4 game this whole time? Like, I don't know. It's a strange time. It honestly is a strange time, and we will see how things go from here. But
We have seen cross-gen system sellers before, though. I mean, we talked about Breath of the Wild earlier, and like, let's be honest, that was a huge boon to the beginning of the Switch life cycle, despite the fact that it also came out on the Wii U.
right, that's true.
So I mean, like
Or
that.
even
So like
like
cross-gen system sellers have definitely existed in the past. It's just that like PlayStation has just not succeeded with theirs yet.
well, Twilight Princess was the same thing. I think the bigger issue there is the fact that the only way that they're selling us on the Series X and the PS5 is how much more powerful it is. So a cross-gen game like that really just falls on its face because I'm not seeing the difference. I'm seeing me playing a PS4 game on my PS5, where the difference between the Wii U and the Switch, like Breath of the Wild, was negligible, but like we weren't selling it on the fact that the Switch is going to look so much better than the Wii U. We're selling it on the fact that it can go portable and then suddenly be used on your TV at home. Like it's the marketing behind the console that has killed the ninth gen of gaming. If I had to point out one thing.
Yeah, yeah.
All right, so we've reached near the end of the episode, but another big thing did happen. I alluded to going there myself on Friday, and Siegen has also had his visa stamped. Black Panther Wakanda Forever is out. And it's only been out now for 4 days, right? It came out on Thursday, so, about 4 days it's been out. And like, we're not going to talk huge about it, right? We don't want to avoid spoilers. Or I would like to avoid spoilers. I'd like to let people have time to do it. But, like, first impressions after seeing that movie, Siegen, how did you feel about it?
I mean, I think it's a beautiful film. There's I'm still honestly processing it. I saw it 24 hours. I'm still kind of sitting in it. It's got a lot going on that you do need to kind of like process. But taking the Chadwick Boseman like tribute stuff that they, first of all, I think they had to do. I don't think there was any way they could do this character moving forward and not address it in some way. And the fact that Coogler and the creative team behind this movie decide to just full on address it throughout this whole movie, like I don't know of any film I've ever seen like this before. And in that regard, it is walking a risky line in that, like, you know, how much is too much, and like, are we gonna just straight up just start calling out like real world people and things like that. And it rides that line well. I think it does really good in that regard. Removing that from the equation is then just the fact of it as a Black Panther sequel, and there's a ton of stuff going on in that regard that I really loved there too. So I think it kind of has to serve like two masters, and like it succeeds in both. And I think that that's a phenomenal like achievement. I don't know, like at the end of the day, I feel like it has a little bit of sequelitis in that it, not that it treads a lot of ground from before. In fact, I think it does a really good job of evolving a lot of stuff from the first one, but it feels like it's setting up a lot going forward. You know, it's that mid Marvel issue that they were having back with like Thor 2 and Iron Man 2 and all of that, where the sequels were enjoyable, watchable, fun, but they didn't really have much meat on their bones, because they were doing so much to kind of set up Avengers or coming storylines, coming characters and stuff like that. And this movie falls a little bit into that. I think that's the worst sin that it commits, though, is that like it spends a little too much time setting up stuff for future movies and not enough time being its own movie. But that's not true for all of it. Like that's not like, there are definite scenes in this movie that are just gorgeous, phenomenal scenes that are in this movie. They're not just referencing past stuff or growing or you know, growing lore or anything like that. Um, but if I had to really pick one thing to really kind of point out that really didn't quite hit the ear right, was there was a lot of stuff going on in the movie where I was like, that'll be really cool when they finally get to an X-Men movie, or that'll be really cool when they get to the next Avengers, or when they talk to, you know, I can't believe how much Secret Invasion I'm looking forward to after seeing this movie. You know, like there's a ton of stuff in that regard. And I think that the only reason that hits my ear wrong is because me personally, Sejin doesn't mind that stuff. I love that kind of stuff. Like, set up all those future movies. Let me talk with my friends about what's possible and all that. But if I have to listen to one more person talk about how they just want to watch a Marvel movie that just stands on its own, like, I'm gonna claw my eyes out, because like I get that that's a huge criticism of these films, but they keep making bank, so they're not gonna make them any different, guys. Like,
True. That's
but that would probably be the biggest criticism that I'd levy against this film. Otherwise, I sat there for first of all, what I was told was 3 hours, but did not feel like 3 hours. It like, that movie moves
Yeah, I will
from
agree.
moment one.
That 3 hours 5 minutes was what I was told the runtime is, and it's a little shorter than that. They're incorporating trailer length now. It seems like they want
Yeah.
people to know exactly how long they're in the theater. And I will give the showcase all the credit in the world. That movie started at 11:55. Well, the trailer started at 11:55, and I walked out of the theater at 2 o'clock after sitting through the credits. So they know now. Like, it was exactly 3 hours and 5 minutes in that movie theater. The movie itself moved at a lovely clip, and there are things that are present in this film that blew me away. There are choices that are made, there are things that happen, there are visuals that are used that blew me away. But then there were
Coogler is a phenomenal director, and I think that what really kind of got me is that you can see these really beautiful moments of his directing, and then you can see these moments where it felt like this has to be here. Like, Kevin Feige suddenly walks in the room and is just like, no, don't forget to do this. Don't forget to tell the audience about this. I have other things I need them to know. And Coogler's just like, okay, like, just lets that happen. And that's disappointing, considering how much the first movie feels like it is like
his movie. Yeah.
So, and that's what I think I mean, where it kind of gets bogged down in kind of too much worry about the rest of the world of the MCU is kind of bogs this movie down in a way that people have been complaining about for a long time with these movies, and have celebrated projects that didn't find themselves in that regard. I mean, on this very show, we talked about how great something like Werewolf by Night was, because of how much it just did not bother placing itself in the rest of the universe yet. and that was refreshing, but this movie doesn't, it unfortunately has to fall into that trap again, because it is kind of a big movie in that regard, in setting up future stuff of the
I mean,
MCU.
it's the end of Phase 4, and I totally get that. And some of the cool like reveals of how certain characters are related to other characters worked for me. But then some of the other stuff that they're clearly setting up for the next one, I felt like they just didn't give enough for me to be invested or care. And one of the really strange things about it, right, and this is what was weighing on me as this movie starts, is did you see a Quantumania trailer before Black Panther 2, Wakanda
No.
Forever? Okay. So I did. They showed one before it. And at the end of it is Kang the Conqueror. Spoilers for that movie,
Yeah,
right? But like,
I mean, I've seen the preview, but they did not show it
yeah.
in theaters. So yeah.
So that's the first time that I saw the preview. And so they show that, Kang the Conqueror and everything. And I asked my mother, I'm like, do you know who that character is, right? Because it's still Jonathan Majors, right, who's playing
Right.
the role. And she's
Right.
like, I have no idea. And I'm like, he was in Loki. And she's like, good. And I'm just like, cool, Ma, thanks. I'm going to reference this on the show. Because if they're not for the like common man, the common viewer, making enough of an impact with these characters, then it doesn't matter that they come back. And my mother really liked Loki. But the fact that He Who Remains did not connect with her to then be the guy in Quantumania.
I mean, to be fair, if we're talking about the same preview, he shows up for all of like a 5-second shot, and that might be being generous.
True.
Do
That's true.
do you have like line work or anything like that in that preview? Also, he looks completely different. Like, there's actually a part of me that thinks that they want it to be some big reveal that it's the one from the guy from Loki, and I was like, I don't know if that secret's going to be what you think it is, guys. Like, I don't like, I thought they were purposely trying to hide the fact that they were the same person.
Oh, I mean, I guess knowing it didn't really work for me, but it was one of those moments where I'm just like, all right, cool. I'm gonna file that away and I'm going to share it. But then, like something like a certain character who's introduced in this movie, because we're trying to stay spoiler free as possible. I was very excited to see them, and then they were just kind of there to be like, well, they'll be in another movie. Don't worry. And I'm like, but this is a pretty good time to kind of lay down some backstory for them, or like make me care about them, so that when they do come back, I'll be invested.
Yeah.
And I like that. And then I guess one of those things about talking where like it still feels like kind of a standalone Coogler project is the fact that the scene that probably would have happened at the end of the credits, because there is no after credit scene, there's a mid credit scene, there's no after credit scene. I love that. It always makes me happy when that happens because of the collective disappointment from everybody in the theater. I know that I'm a chaos bastard. I know that like that's the thing, but I'm watching the credits regardless. Sejin will tell you that as the person who's had to sit next to me through so many credits where there is no payoff at the end of the credits.
Yeah.
So like whenever there is nothing at the end of the credits, there's no like move forward, there's no chessboard scene at the end of the credits, I'm very happy because it's like, well, I was gonna be here anyway. Right? Like that would be a bonus for me. But then the like, oh, what the fuck, from one of the guys sitting down near the screen, and I'm just like, oh, I wish that didn't make me as happy as it does. If I had a therapist, I guess I'd bring this up, right? Why such Schadenfreude, Sejin? Why such Schadenfreude? But like that, I could have totally seen that scene of them interacting with another character who's very similar to them. I think you got everything. I think if you've seen the movie, you get everything that I'm addressing here.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, so I feel like that's cooler being like, no, the mid-credit scene is important to me and the story that I wanted to tell in this movie.
Yeah.
But I don't see the need to tack that on to like move more pieces for you in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, Fai.
Well, and what I also, man, yeah, we need to have a proper time to talk about this movie because there's some stuff that happens.
I need to
in the
watch it
movie
again. I need to watch it another time because
keep an ear out, because there is a moment where I realized like way too late last night, like I was like still thinking about this movie because it, like I said, it just sticks with you, so I'm just like ruminating on it. And then there's this moment where I realized, oh shit, they actually set that up much earlier, and I didn't, and I only thought about it like mid. So we need to talk about it because there is so just some really intelligent, really good filmmaking going on in this movie. Which, surprise, surprise, I mean it's Ryan Coogler making this movie. Like that isn't the big like, oh my god, they pulled it off moment for me. What is how he's then able to basically balance these two projects in one. This beautiful goodbye to Chadwick Boseman, but then on top of that, also like doing Black Panther 2 and moving forward in that regard. It's a phenomenal achievement. I don't think we're ever going to see another MCU film like it. I hope we don't ever have to see another MCU film like it because it only comes from the tragedy of losing Boseman, you know. But in that, like being able to make this beautiful piece of art that hopefully will help some people heal in some ways that like it's great. It was just a good time at the movie theater, and on top of that, achieved so much as a movie. So I'm very 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 excited to see how it how other people react to it.
I guess I'm excited to rewatch the movie without the guise of like expectation, because not that I was expecting anything. I had stayed away from almost everything regarding this film except for the Hasbro release of a figure that spoils someone's inclusion in this particular film.
Yeah.
Like, which just was really strange because there was no announcement. It was just suddenly available on their website to purchase. And it's like, oh, okay. I think it's like you guys know that we shouldn't be doing this, but also we want to get the sales, right?
Yeah, yeah,
We want to make
yep.
sure you have it for Christmas. Which is also sort of the dicey thing about the November released Marvel cinematic film, right? Like
Yep.
Eternals is perfect because either they care about the characters or they don't. But when it's a big established character coming out in November, and historically that's not what we've seen. You have Eternals, you have Doctor Strange, then you have like characters who like are new. So like if people want the figures, they're okay waiting for them. So like this is the first
Yeah.
time it's been a big tentpole character coming out
Thor
as
had November for a while, didn't he?
Thor Ragnarok did come out in November. That was
And
the
I'm pretty
one.
sure Dark World was a November release.
I don't remember. I just know that I liked the Dark World. I thought that was an April release though.
No, that might have been one of the May ones. One of the ones that
Yeah,
was maybe originally planned for November and got moved around when they started playing with schedules.
because it because
Um,
it tied into a later episode of season 2 of
yeah.
Agents of Shield. Because Lady Sif showed up, and I'm just like, oh, cool! These actually exist in the same universe until they didn't anymore.
Well, the
Um,
multiverse has now allowed them to come back in, so it's fine. No, the big thing about a November release for Black Panther 2, though, is that it means that Disney Plus can put it up just in time for February. Like
yeah,
that's going to be a huge thing that you're going to see. So, but on top of that, I also, Ryan Coogler led project on one of their most like beloved, like artistically beloved films in the MCU. Could be doing an Oscar push. Like that's the other big thing about releasing it now is like I think that one of the big things because remember the first one came out in February of the year that it came out. What was that? 2018.
we were doing the show, so it was either 2018 or 2000. I think it was 2018. I think it was the
Right.
movie right
And then
before Infinity War.
remember by the end of the year, people were trying to say like really trying to give it a good Oscars push, but there was a lot
It
of
was
stuff
Oscar
wrapped up in it.
nominated. Like it,
Right,
yeah.
right, and it ended up getting the nomination and all of that. So I think that like seeing that, I think the other big thing about placing it at this time is definitely putting it in award season, squarely in award season. No, like there's no question about this. Like, yeah, we I think we're gonna see some of that going on too with this film.
Yeah. I don't know. It's any Oscars right now, like in this weird post-pandemic funk in terms of cinema, feels like they have an asterisk attached to them, and that because it's like how many movies are coming out, right? Like it's not like
I mean, this
before.
year, sure, but I think that like this year has definitely seen a huge return to films being in theaters, right? And
True.
like we saw a preview. You know, one of the previews that we saw was Greatest Beer Run Ever, which has been out on Apple for 2 months now. But we saw it as a preview as coming to theaters, like like we were like, okay, because apparently Apple's going to try and push that one into theaters for a little bit, probably so that it can be considered for an award. Again, you have Peter Farley at the top bill on it, and like you've got the draw of Zac Efron as your main character, but then also some good side characters with guys like Bill Murray. So like they could easily push themselves as an Oscar film, but they need to be in theaters in order to do that. So despite the fact that we saw that movie come out 2 months ago on a streaming service, we were probably going to see a theatrical run of that movie, all for Oscars and stuff like that, because that's I think they're back, like
Yeah.
not anywhere near the levels that they were at before the pandemic. I think the ways that we view movies and the ways that we view success in film are really going to have to change post pandemic. But in that regard, like, I think the Oscars, this might be the first year that I pay attention. I don't know if I'm going to watch. We'll see. Maybe. But this is the first year there's a bunch of movies out. This is the first year where like movies are really contending for an Oscar. Like, it's not a bunch of people who are like, oh shit, nobody else has a movie out this year, let's put ours out in November and see what we can do. Like, it feels like more like, okay, we're making this movie to come out during this time of the year.
Yeah, there was a certain Oscars push. I can see that. There's an Oscar season of films. That is definitely true. I guess I don't know. I think the last thing I want to say about Black Panther Wakanda Forever is this, and it is amazingly like self-promotion here on this. Of the movies that I saw last week, I didn't expect The Cobbler to be my favorite one. And that includes Wakanda Forever amongst them. And Bullet Train, which we'll talk about Bullet Train someday too. But so there's something to look forward to. One day we will do a full deep dive into Black Panther Wakanda Forever. I think CJ and I are going to talk about something right now once we're off microphone. And it won't be weird, sexual kinks of Sunday morning cartoonists. It'll be something Black Panther related. But until then, if you would like to share
our usual fare.
Until then, if you would like to share any of the other Horde roguelike style games that you're playing, or your personal theories about what Black Panther Wakanda Forever sets up for the MCU going forward, Siegen is available currently, I don't know for how much longer, on Twitter at Siege versus the World.
Oh yeah, I forgot to cancel that this week. But you can find Dev if you have anything at all that you want to talk about that is not video game related. Hit him up at Devin D Tech, because this was a very video game heavy week. People might need to talk about some other stuff.
We have been owing the people a video game heavy week. Somebody actually came forward and was like, "Why aren't you guys talking about games lately?" And I'm like, "Oh, have I got a surprise for you?"
Oh, I have also gotten very deep into the new Mario Rabbids, but I have not talked about that yet because I'm still playing it, and I don't want you bastards to taint my enjoyment of it.
See? So don't taint Siege's enjoyment. Enjoy the rest of your days, and Will, please bring us home.
Thank you for listening to the Say Report with your host Devin Decker and Stephen Selwick. Please follow the guys on Twitter and Facebook by searching for The Say Report, and you can always subscribe on your podcast channel so this is delivered straight to you and you can enjoy it every week. With apologies to your mother, we'll see you next time.